Welcome to the Deaf Kid Show. Let's go.
To all my listeners, please go to thedifferentbook.com and pick up a copy of my new children's book, Different. 10% of every book sold goes directly to the cystic fibrosis charity Emily's Entourage, which is searching for a cure for a unique mutation of the cystic fibrosis gene. I recommend Different to children ages 5 and up. Growing up as kids, we sometimes feel like we don't fit in with everyone else, whether it's our curly hair, a mole or freckle we don't like, being too tall or too short, the list goes on. Different teaches kids that we all have our thing, and everyone is different, which means being different is normal. I'm very excited about this book and want to give as much as I can to Emily's Entourage, so please pick up a copy for your kids or grandkids or friends' kids and help me spread the word. Check out thedifferentbook.com for all the details, and if you haven't yet, please rate this podcast 5 stars and leave a review. It all really does help. Hey! All right. Welcome to the GK Show. Fun music at the beginning. Yeah! Hope you're having a good day. Let's start the pod. So I'm talking to Tom Sims, right? That's how you say it, right, Tom? Sims?
Yeah.
I always, I know that it's Sims, but it's S-I-M-E-S. It always confuses me. Tom is the owner of Stir Crazy Comedy Club, which is a really cool comedy club in Glendale, Arizona. And I want to ask you first, Tom, because you were a comedian and you decided to open a club, and I want to know what made you come to that point.
So yeah, I kind of started producing my own shows around town here and there, and I just kind of found that I enjoyed that a lot more than I did performing. So it just, it kind of just led to it eventually.
Okay, and so I never knew you. I don't think we ever bumped into each other as comedians, but you were really funny, right? Like I remember I looked up a clip.
No,
you weren't?
Not really.
I saw a clip of you, and there's a lot of people who don't quit comedy, who I'm like, why is that guy still doing it, or that person? So you don't perform anymore at all?
I haven't really since I opened the club, but I've started booking a few things around town just kind of for the heck of it. But it's been a couple of years, yeah.
So, you have to miss it a little bit, right?
Not really. Not really. In general, I don't. Every so often, I'll get an idea and think, oh, that'd be kind of fun to see if that works, but not really. Not really.
All right. Do you have any favorite story before we move off this? You being a comedian, do you have any favorite story from when you were a comedian? How long were you a comedian?
It's been about 10 years now, I guess.
Okay.
So when I opened the club, I guess that would be about 8 years.
And do you have any stories of crazy nights, or working with somebody famous, or working with somebody that something happened at a club or anything?
Nothing that sticks to my head. No, I was very fortunate. I started kind of getting a lot of work very early, so I got to work with a lot of cool people in those 8 years. And then, that was kind of the fun of it when I opened the club. I got to go, hit up all these people that I got to work with over the years and have them at my club. That's kind of been the coolest thing is just getting to, meeting everybody. Even though I don't really consider myself a comedian anymore, I like being a comic. I like comics, and I like hanging with comics and talking comedy and all that stuff. So that's the coolest thing is now I get to have all these guys and gals back to the club, and that's been.
Do you have a worst bomb story? I have so many fun stories of just crappy shows or times I just ate shit. And I was like, that's because I feel like every comic has them. Some comics, I always like running into those people that are like, yeah, man, I don't know, I've never bombed. It's like, how have you never bombed? Like, you never tried something new and just had a bad time? You never ran into something, like a crowd that just didn't like you? So I always think those are fun if anybody has like one that sticks out.
Yeah, one thing I was always kind of able to do is I think most comics, we all sort of hate each other or hate ourselves anyway, I think. But I was always able to sort of grade myself on a curve. So if it was just a crappy night, I wouldn't beat myself up if I was, one of many that didn't do well. But I do remember one time I bombed the hardest I ever did, and I can still feel it in my stomach. It's just, I remember going up and I said something right out of the gate trying to engage this group of women who were getting up to leave, and it just came out, everything came out wrong. And my entire set, the entire crowd just hated me because of, whatever I said. It just came out wrong. It was trying to be a joke. It just looked terrible. And I could feel them actively hate me through the entire set. And thank God I got lit early. I was like, thank you. But yeah, I can still feel that in my stomach if I think about back to that night.
Isn't there I wish there was a way, I don't know what kind of science it would be, like quantum mechanics or something, to actually measure the vibe in the room. You know what I mean? Because we could feel it, like you just said. I've had sets where, I remember one a couple of years ago, and I was doing the show in LA, and it wasn't like a big show or anything, and the three comics before me were all doing jokes about the police and how the police are so bad and everything, and I wasn't even taking a sort of political stance on it. I just thought it would be, I knew it was a risk saying it, but the first thing out of my mouth, I grabbed the mic, I go, hey guys, before I even start, let's just real quick, round of applause for the cops, they keep us safe, and like the whole, I felt the vibe in the room just be like, it wasn't just like, oh, it wasn't funny. We all say a joke that maybe doesn't hit the way we want. It was like, I felt the audience be like, fuck this guy. We're not going to give this guy anything. And like one table got on board eventually, and they were like laughing really hard and even like applauding, but the rest of the room was like, nah. We don't, like they I think they thought it was racist or something. I was just making a joke because the last three comics were all doing similar material. But yeah, I bombed really hard. I mean, I'm not going to go on like with my stories, but when I was really young, and Pablo Francisco had me opening for him, and his crowds were just perfect for me at that age and everything. And so his crowds, I would have really, really awesome sets, and I didn't really know any better. And I didn't know the difference between opening for a different person. And my manager at the time was like, hey, do you want to go to Palm Beach and feature for Jeff Dunham? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, you only have to do 20. And with Pablo, I would do 30. So I'm like, this is easy. And he goes, you got to keep a little cleaner. And long story short, the first night, I had a really good set, and I tested the waters, and I kind of pressed it a little bit. They were fine, and I don't know why that crowd was fine with what I was doing. The next night, I bombed so hard, and it was packed. It wasn't like, oh, this is a small show, there's only 10 people here, or everyone's doing bad. I mean, the host did good. I went up, and it was 350 people, not an empty seat, and I was just eating shit for 20 minutes. So we're like, have you ever bombed so your mouth dries up? I mean, like the saliva left my mouth, and I went and I had another set. I did 7 shows that week with Dunham, and I remember 2 of them were good, 3 were like whatever. I got through it, and they were okay. People were laughing, not laughing super hard like I was used to with Pablo, and 2 of them were like that show where I just ate it so bad. I remember I sat in the gutter and cried because
wow.
I didn't even think I deserved the curb. I remember thinking like, you don't even deserve the curb, so I sat in the gutter. But all right. So I think my bombing story that I mentioned, that was pretty early for me, so I hadn't experienced that yet too hard. Yeah.
But then after that, anytime I was having a bad set, it was really more amusing to me. I really didn't take it hard. It was just in my head, I was just like, oh man, this is bad. This is hilarious.
Yeah.
So I kind of just, I don't know, it never really bothered me that much on those kind of sets. I was just thinking, though, that when I had you at the club, I don't know if you remember this, and, if we can move on if you want, but it's a funny story. So I don't know if you remember I think it was the host that night. or maybe the feature. He met someone on Tinder earlier in the day, and he had her and her friend come out. He didn't know them, and they were terrible. They were yelling out through the whole show, through your set, and you brought them on stage. Do you remember that?
Oh, I remember those people.
Had to sing or dance or something, and you really made it into like a hilarious night. But you brought these train wrecks up on stage and let them just go, and it could have been a very, very bad show, but you were able to make it into something. I don't know if you remember that.
I do remember doing that, and what's funny is that Dunham story I told. After that, I think I kind of realized, okay, I got to write more stuff because not every crowd's the same. And I when I'm having a bad set now or something's not going right, I'm kind of like what you're saying, like it's just humorous to me. But I just remember early on that was really bad. But that's kind of a risky move, bringing those girls on stage. But I just kind of felt, like I said, sometimes it's a vibe and you can tell like, oh, I'll be able to handle this. And sometimes, that's why I don't ever really get mad at hecklers. I think some comics I've seen, the second someone yells out, they're like, oh yeah, and then they get like real angry. I'm like, dude, this isn't going to register well with the audience that you're snapping this quick, So I never lose it on stage. And most of the time, and you own a club, you've done comedy, 99% of the time, I think hecklers are just usually a little too drunk, and they're not trying to ruin the show. They think that's part of the show. So I always kind of try and keep it light and whatever. But I think those girls just thought like, oh, this is like a nightclub or something, and we're allowed to yell out, and I don't know what they're thinking. All right, I want to ask you, or not even ask you, can you explain, because you took extra steps to make your comedy club great, like a great experience for the comedian and the audience. So can you explain a little bit? Because I think most people, like we just talked about, don't really get that comedy is best performed in a certain type of setting, and you did a really good job, and we were very like scientific and technical about everything you did with your clubs. Can you explain that real quick?
I'm full on sort of OCD about that kind of stuff. Well, I think one, just from being a comic, I think you sort of learn a lot of obvious things like, audience facing forward, turn the TVs off, low ceiling, all of that kind of that stuff. But it's just something that I was always kind of fascinated with, the psychology of the crowd and just sort of setting up the show itself. And this is kind of something that I started to learn over time, producing my own shows and playing around with ideas. And it was really kind of a practice run, I suppose, although I didn't know it at the time, for opening the club. But, I want people to experience comedy in the best possible way. I want to set up the comedians to do as good as they can possibly do. And part of that is just taking care of them and making sure that they're, happy and love the club, and they're, if they're in a good mood, it's going to be reflected, in their set, and the audience is going to enjoy it more. And, it's just kind of cyclical that way. So, I figure if I just can keep my staff happy, the comics happy, and hopefully the customers happy, these customers they're going to have a great time and want to come back. That was kind of the theory on everything. But, a lot of the little things that we do, I just happen to know because I was a comedian, and things that I experienced positively, I've tried to implement, and things that I experienced negatively, I try to, not do those things. But that's just the idea. And I could talk for hours on every little detail that goes into stuff. And actually, I have an episode of my podcast where I totally geek out on the details with Todd Glass coming up. I don't know if you know him. He's pretty into that stuff too.
I've seen Todd go on rants about how comedy clubs should be set up and everything. And that's probably a good guess. But real quick, now you mentioned your podcast. Tell everyone what your podcast is.
The Business of Comedy with Tom Sims. It's kind of new. I think I'm only like 7 episodes in, but what I try to do is just interview people in the business, bookers, managers, club owners, etc., and just sort of let comics listen in to people in the business talking. Maybe they gain a little insight and stuff. And comics who have specific jobs in the business as well, like maybe they write for a show or whatever. But it's just a way for comics to kind of learn sort of the ins and outs from the business perspective.
Oh, that's very cool. So that leads into my next question. What have you noticed now that you own a club, you know, and you're booking, you're on the other side of it, what are some things that maybe you didn't realize when you're a comic, or that you realize as a booker and owner, or something you have to deal with comedians and their personalities? Because every booker is different, so comedians we have to deal with that, and you guys have to deal with a bunch of psychopath comedians who are all dealing with their own thing.
You know, for the most part, it's not bad. I mean, what I didn't appreciate is just how many comics there are. And you know, I was out there trying to hustle gigs and, you know, cold emailing, if you will, clubs and bookers trying to get in, and they don't respond and you don't know why and all that stuff. Now I totally get it. You know, we're just, even my little club, I'm inundated with comics from just all over the country, just trying to get work. And that's the biggest thing that when comics ask me for advice on getting booked is, you know, you just have to understand that you're just one in a million that are trying to get work at these places, and it's going to be tough because, you know, you're just a faceless comic in an email to these bookers. So it's really tough to break through and just, you know, and to get into a place. So that's kind of what you're dealing with. So I didn't appreciate that. I had no idea how many comics there were trying to get work. And just little things, you know, just the way comics approach me, you know, the dumb things that they put in emails. It's like, really? Did you just say that?
What are some of those? Because I honestly feel like, and I try and keep my emails as short as possible, but I feel like I'm terrible. It could just be in my own head over email or text. Like, I always feel like I'm annoying somebody. That's probably just my own insecurity, but I just don't know how to email right. I don't know how often to email. And even people that I'm on good terms with, like you or other clubs at work, I'm like, man, I wonder if I'm bugging the shit out of Tom by asking for another date. It's been 6 months. Should I wait 8? Should I wait a year? No. So I never know I feel like on the phone or something, like people can hear your tone and know that you're not being an asshole. But I just feel like I'm stuck at emails.
No, you know, every booker's different a little bit. I would say there's a lot of commonality, and just, you know, through this podcast, I try to interview a bunch of bookers just to show everybody how much is, you know, consistent and you know, what might be different based on the booker's wants and desires, you know, and their needs. But I would say, you know, as far as frequency, just ask, you know, how often do you want me to send avails? And most of them, I happen to book a long way out, not on purpose. It's just sort of, you know, this is, what is this, mid-November, and I'm already booked till like September of next year, as far as for headliners. And that's not planned. It's just because I get hit up so often, and, you know, they go to the end of the line, you know, so it gets out. I know, there's a club owner, I think he's in Michigan or something. He books, I've heard, an entire year out. That's just the way he does it. I know some bookers that book, you know, they only book a month or two out. So it really depends on the booker or the club owner. And I would just say, hey, I love, you know, I want to work your club. How often should I send my avails? And they'll tell you, send them every 3 months, send them every month, or whatever it is, and just sort of do what they want. When I say, you know, the crazy emails I get, most of that's not from headliners. It's usually like open micer levels who think they're ready to feature, and then they just send you this super aggressive email, and then they're not happy with their response, so now they're pestering you and trying to sell you and insulting you and stuff like that. Not realizing, you know, it's, to me, it's like, don't you understand that I'm never going to book you because you're obviously, you know, a jerk?
Yeah.
But I get those. I don't get a lot of those, but I do get those. So it's just little things like that, you know, just being cool, you know, just, hey, you know, just being straight up and, you know, just having all the information that a club would want in the email as well. I don't want to have to email you, you know, over and over. Can you send me this? Can you send me that? Just, you know, just send everything that they might want and you know, wait for them to get back to you.
Yeah, I had a booker. I had multiple headliners for this booker vouch for me, which I usually think is the best way to get in, and then emailed them, and then I just like wasn't hearing back. And I was putting in the subject line like recommended by these 3 headliners that I know work all their clubs, and then she finally responds, and then she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna get you in the rotation." She's like, "Keep bugging me." She's like, "If I don't get back to you," she was keep emailing me, and then I'm like, she said to keep emailing her. I still feel like I'm being annoying. Like, you know.
No. The reason why they say that is we just forget about people. You know.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, and somebody will tell you. I think most of them will tell you if they're not going to book you. You know, early on when I first started, I would respond to people. Comics say, "Oh, just be honest." Well, I've learned that comics don't want you to be honest. If I respond anything that isn't what they want to hear, then now I'm in a 50 email exchange, and it's just not worth it. That's why bookers don't respond to your emails. They don't have time to get into email exchanges all day with every comic that isn't getting booked when they want to be booked. So, I mean, if that booker told you to keep bugging her, then absolutely, and just, maybe mention, hey, how often should I email you? I don't want to email you too much or whatever. But yeah, no, it's the same way I tell the locals all the time. I forget about people, and I'll run into a comic at an open mic, and I'm like, oh my God, I forgot all about her. Yeah. And it's just you have to stay on the radar and just ask them. Hey, I don't want to bother you too much. How often do you want me to email? But yeah, you got to stay in their head.
Right. How do you feel? I'm just curious, as a booker, like, do you book people based on, the crowd will like them, or is it you have to personally be a fan of their comedy or get what they do? How does that work?
For me, I like to have a variety of different types of comedy for my audiences. I book people that I don't think are funny all the time. But I know that the audience
I appreciate that, Tom, by the way. I really appreciate it.
No, I mean, you know how comics are. We get, I mean, I don't laugh at comedy anymore. I see jokes coming and all that. Yeah. And, I like a specific kind of comedy, but I can't, I can't just book the same type of comedy, for my audiences. They like different stuff. So I book people that I don't find funny. That happens a lot. I'll watch somebody's video or watch them even in my room, and they're crushing. And I'm like, I don't understand why people are laughing at this. And I'm not talking about hacks. I mean, if I think somebody's a hack, I'm not going to book them. Right. But, I very often I'll watch a comic in my room destroying the place, and I don't get it. I book people that I don't personally like. Just for whatever reason. It's all about the show and about my customers enjoying themselves. That's everything to me. But I do try to keep things mixed, as far as styles and energies and that kind of stuff. I try to, even on the show, I try to have a good mix of comics on a show as well. I want to set the headliner up as well as possible. So, I book a headliner first, and then I think, okay, who would be a good feature for this person? And then I go through my little feature list and think, they'd be good with Jeff, so I'll book them. And then I go to the host and the same thing. And I won't bore you with those details, but that's kind of how I do it. But yeah, it doesn't matter if I find them funny or not.
Okay. How do you feel? And I'm not asking you anything about any of your personal views, but how do you feel about political comedy lately? Because, and just to set it up, I purposely do not inject any of my political views or like push them on the audience. That's just, I feel like unless you're going to be like, hey, I do political comedy, this is my entire lane, I feel like it's weird on my end because, everyone's in the audience. They came to have a good time. You might have Republicans, you might have Democrats. They're all mixed in. You have all different types of people, and people who don't care about politics and they're sick of hearing about it. So I really stay away from that. And then even when I did do it, I did political. I had the chunk around right after the election or during it or something, and I was not taking a position on, I wasn't pro Trump or pro Hillary Clinton or pro Bernie Sanders or anything, and I was just kind of like making jokes about all of them, right? Like I had jokes, and they weren't like about their policies because again, like I'm not trying to offend anybody. And I had jokes about what's his face, Gary Johnson and Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton and Trump and everything. And I preface this with the audience. I go, hey guys, I don't care who you voted for. Everybody's got their opinions on stuff. And then I would like good for you. Like, I'm not bashing anybody for their beliefs. And I would get into it. And in Chicago and in Vegas is the only time I ran into trouble, and people were just upset when I got to their person. And again, I'm not doing like, Hillary, blah, 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 or Trump, this guy is, I wasn't doing that. And it was shocking to me, like, how polarized everybody is. I guess not shocking is the right word. I know how polarized everybody is. But what is your take on political comedy lately? Because in my opinion, I see a lot of people who just aren't good at it.
Yeah. Well, so I'll start I'll start here. So for me, comedy, the thing that I love about comedy is, a typical audience is made up of a very diverse group of people, right? Different races, religions, political, everything. It's a hodgepodge of everybody. And when a comic gets all these different people on that wave, and they're crushing, that's an amazing thing to me. Yeah. It's a shared social experience, and that's the great thing about comedy. Now, that being said, I think if you're Louis Black or you're Dennis Miller or you're known, this is what we're going to get. We're going to go see this. We know what they're going to say. That's one thing. But, a club my size, most of my customers don't know who the comics are. They're not coming really to see the headliner. They're just coming to see comedy. Yeah. So that being said, if they show up and, they bought tickets, they got a babysitter, they ironed their shirt, they found parking, they came in, they're ready to have a good time, and now someone's trashing the person that they love for whatever reason, now they're not going to have a good time, and that's what they're coming to see comedy for. So, so it's like, I'm never going to tell a comic when they come in, hey, don't do this, don't say that. I'll never do that. But from a business perspective, who wants my crowd to have a good time, I want them to leave in a better mood that they came in. That's what I want them to do. So if you walk a bunch of people because you want to have a take on something, obviously that's going to factor into my calculation of whether or not I'm going to have you back. I mean, I had a comic who I love. I think this person is extremely funny. I was excited to have them, but they walk like 6 tables. Yeah. And in my little room, that's a high percentage of the crowd. And, that's dollars. That I have a business. I have bills. I can't short my rent because, we had a bad weekend because my headliner really hated, whoever it was. So that has to factor into it, And now some people, some comics, they can have a take and make it funny and palatable for people who might hate that person. But a lot of the times it's not, and sometimes it goes even farther. I had a feature who walked a bunch of people. A feature.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. That's my pet peeve is when people opening for me are doing extremely divisive political material. Yeah. I've had people walk people, and I'm like, it's not your show. You know what I mean? I get that I'm not like some huge name, but when I'm opening for somebody, if I'm, if I'm on a show where there's just multiple comics, and it's like sometimes I've seen hosts when they're having a bad set, and then they just start shitting on the audience. It's like, yo, you're the host. Just be in a good mood and like be friendly, and then bring up the next act and tell everyone they're gonna have a great night. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I can't stand when openers, like, I would just never do that on somebody's show, and then they're just like getting into it with the audience, like, oh you like Trump, like you're a fucking idiot. I'm like, what are you doing? That's not a joke.
No, it happens. The only time that's happened with features for me is when the headliner brought the feature. It's not somebody that I knew. Okay. I use a lot of locals, obviously, because I'm a small club. But the few times that happened, it was the headliner brought the feature, and we had some issues. But and at the end of the day, again, I'm not going to tell somebody they can or can't say something, but I feel like I don't have to tell you what to say, but I also don't have to buy it. So I'm not going to have those people back. I can't have people leaving my comedy club mad. I just don't want that. Yeah. and again, it's different if you're a headliner and they know what they're getting into. That's one thing. But if they're just coming to have a good time, I don't know. I want them to leave in a good mood.
Yeah. Okay. So I just curious about that. I'll wrap up because I don't want to take up too much of your time. But do you have any crazy stories that have happened at your club besides me unprofessionally bringing people on stage? I believe I had a rap, right? That girl, I let her rap. I think now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. I think that was it. I knew you let her. Yeah. I just love that because it was in the moment. It was great. It was an experience for everybody, but it was risky for you. You know what I mean? That could have went very bad, and you could have had a big hole to climb back out of. But it was great. I mean, everybody enjoyed it. Any craziness? No, not really. We've been pretty fortunate. We don't have rowdy crowds. I think in the 2 years we've been open, I think we've had to ask 2 people to leave, something like that. We've been pretty fortunate. We've had a few headliners and a couple features that have, walked some people. But other than that, we haven't really had any craziness. It's been going pretty well, I think.
All right. Okay. Geez, maybe it's just me. I've had a couple brawls at shows while I'm on stage. But do you have any, you don't have to name names, obviously. Are there any comics that have gotten into it with you or said anything ridiculous? I know I've talked to some bookers who have told me that certain comics, when they don't get booked, this one booker told me that they were like, oh, you just don't like me because I'm gay. And the guy was telling me the story like, I don't give a shit if somebody's gay. Like, what is he talking about? I don't have a lot of spots to go around. And so are there anybody who, you mentioned it a little bit earlier that some people get real aggressive with you. But have you had any blow-ups with any comics?
I haven't. I don't know what's said about me, out there in the wild. I haven't had any back and forth with any comics, actually. The only sort of things that I've gotten into were literally with open micers through email who didn't even know who they were talking to. They were just, in the sense that they didn't know me from the scene or anything. They were just talking to the club. And they get aggressive, and I've saved some of those. Maybe I'll make a coffee table book of bad booking emails. But
that'd be funny.
But no, not really. I mean, it's a pretty, I try to keep everything pretty chill. I'm sure, nobody. I certainly didn't, like to send a booking email and never hear back and not know why. But now I understand it. But I'm sure people are mad at me about that, and comics who I haven't booked. You know what? I did, now that I think about it, I did have one headliner. He's been around a long time. He got a hold of me. He's so old school that he actually called the club. So that shows you how old school he is. And I didn't want to book him. One, because I don't know, he's very old school, and I didn't want to book him. But I also felt like, this guy's been around a long time. Who am I to not book him? So I kind of had that feeling too, and I just didn't want to deal with it.
Right.
And I was kind of putting it off, and he called me a couple times, and this was still early on where, part of the fun for me, like I mentioned, is just booking people that I know I want to book. Ooh, I want that one, and I want that one, and I want that one. So I was still kind of in that phase where I wasn't looking for comics that I didn't know yet, and it caught me in that, and I was like, well, I'm booked out for a ways, and he started, kind of yelling at me, I'm funnier than all of them, and blah, blah, blah. And then he made it by being a jerk to me, then he made it easy for me to be a jerk back to him. So then I was like, no, I'm not booking you. I don't want you here. So that was an aggressive phone call. But other than that, it's been pretty chill. Like I said, I'm not one of those club owners who just hates comics after all these years. These damn comics. I may get there. I may get there, but I still like comics. I want all comics to succeed, whether I book them or not, for whatever reason. And I think a lot of comics just kind of take it personally, like just trying to keep me down. He doesn't want it. No, there's not enough room for you. So no, I haven't had any real big blow-ups or anything. I got a couple headliners that are a little, maybe a little grumpy, but they've kind of behaved themselves. But nothing too crazy.
That's interesting you say the open micers are the ones that tend to get aggressive. I remember, I'm sure you'll find this story funny. when I was at the Miami Improv a long time ago. I used to be in that South Florida Improv all the time, and the GM at the time, guy Gideon, and he told me I think I was just hanging out on like their open mic night. It was Wednesday, and he said, so they're all open micers, right? And somebody walked in and said he didn't know he was the GM. The guy was the GM of multiple improvs in South Florida, I think. And he goes, the guy goes, where do I go? I'm the talent for this evening. So it is a weird confidence that open micers have. Look, thanks for doing this. Your podcast is called The Business of Comedy with Tom Sims, you said?
Yep.
And everybody, if you're in Arizona, Tom's club, Stir Crazy Comedy Club, is a really fun club. It's run perfectly. You didn't really mention specifically, but some of the things that I remember that you do is you don't drop the checks during the headliner set, which I think is something that most patrons don't understand. Like, that's a huge thing because it's very distracting for the audience, and they kind of tune out the comic because they have to because they're doing math now. And you also have a thing where if somebody wants service, they want another drink or to order something, you have these little lights on the table, and they can just choose the color of the light, which really works out. The thing about dropping checks, I'll just say this real quick. I was working with Chris Kattan years ago. We had the same agent, and my agent goes, hey, do you want to go to Florida with Chris? And he goes, Chris, you know, he kind of just does whatever. Like, he goes up at the beginning, and he goes, I just need you to close out every show. So he said, you know how a show's supposed to be run. So if Chris does, you know, an hour, then you just do, you know, 15, 30. There's a local guy on the show too. And he goes, you just do whatever makes a good show. If you have to do 45 at the end, if you go short, or if you have to do, you know, 15 at the end, just make it a good show and everything. And I'm like, okay. And so the guy that would go up before me, who was a really funny guy, who's a local guy, if he went over it was so weird. And I think you said you're OCD about this. You'll understand this. If he went over his time by a few minutes, then when the club dropped the check, I would go up they'd bring me up to the club dropping the checks. And obviously Chris Kattan was the attraction. So it didn't really matter if I killed or not, you know? And so if this guy got off on time, I would go up and the audience was great and I could deal with the check drop when it happened. And I would have these great sets. And then a couple of times this guy just went long because he was really enjoying the crowd. He's going up in the middle, like in the good spot. And then I would go up and I'd just be eating it because no one was paying attention. I wasn't really eating it. I was just kind of like no one was really paying attention because everybody got the check right then. And I remember I told guys, I go, guys, you know these jokes work, right? I'm not just some psychopath who just came up here and I'm like, you know, and then they all started laughing and paying attention. But it was just so interesting that if this guy went over by just a couple minutes, it changed everything with how my set went, which again didn't really matter because it was Chris's show. But anyways, I know the comics I talk to that work your club and people, they all immediately go and tell the rest of us like, oh, you got to hit up Tom Sims, Stir Crazy, such a great club. So I've never heard a bad word about you. So
I appreciate that, man.
So everybody check out Tom's Comedy Club, Stir Crazy in Glendale, Arizona, and The Business of Comedy with Tom Sims. Go check out his podcast and rate it 5 stars and subscribe and all that stuff. Tom, I'll see you in January, right? I'm there January 9th through 11th, I believe. Yeah.
Yep, that sounds right.
So unless a bigger name wants to do that weekend, I'll see you in January.
All right,
thanks for doing it, Tom. I appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to my daddy.